I'm going to read from the Message version. Don't let this throw you. You trust God, don't you? Then trust me. There is plenty of room for you in my Father's home. If that weren't so, would I have told you that I'm on my way to get a room ready for you? And if I'm on my way to get your room ready, I'll come back and get you, so that you can live where I live. And you already know the road I'm taking. Thomas said, Master, we have no idea where you're going. How do you expect us to know the road? Jesus said, I am the road, also the truth, also the life. No one gets to the Father apart from me. If you really knew me, you would know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him. You've even seen him. Philip said, Master, show us the Father, and we'll be content. You've been with me all this time, Philip, and you still don't understand? To see me is to see the Father. So how can you ask, where is the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words that I speak to you aren't mere words. I don't just make them up on my own. The Father who resides in me crafts each word into a divine act. Believe me, I am in my Father, and my Father is in me. If you can't believe that, believe what you see, these works. The person who trusts me will not only do what I'm doing, but even greater things. Because I, on my way to the Father, am giving you the same work to do that I've been doing. You can count on it. From now on, whatever you request along the lines of who I am and what I am doing, I'll do it. That's how the Father will be seen for who he is in the Son. I mean it. Whatever you request in this way, I'll do. Tom was an exchange student. He traveled in 1996 from Australia to Reykjavik, Iceland, where he was going to do an exchange program. And while he was there, being the weirdo that he was, being in the climate of Australia, he loved winters, he loved the cold, and so he spent his time snowboarding and having fun, and he eventually met a girl named Fortis, and Fortis became his girlfriend. Tom was 18 and Fortis was 16, and they had been dating for about a month, and they went to a Christmas dinner, a dance together. And Fortis, for the first time, got the bright idea of trying alcohol. She drank some rum. Didn't sit too well with her. She wasn't feeling very well physically or mentally. She was woozy, really out of it. And some folks had offered to call her a cab or even to drive her home. And her boyfriend said, no, it's okay, I'll take her home. And thank goodness, I mean, her knight in shining armor, as she said, he wanted to make sure she got home safely. And he took her home and he put her in the bed. And instead of doing the chivalrous thing and going and letting her sleep it off, he raped her. She said it felt like it was ripping her apart. Mentally, the most blinding pain she'd ever experienced. And it was 2 hours later that he just walked away. Never to call her, never to face this event, never to discuss it, never to find any sort of reconciliation for what he'd done. He just walked away, and about a month later flew back to Australia. And it was in the rearview mirror, supposedly. Well, of course, it bothered her. And for 9 years, she blamed herself. See, she said that she grew up in a culture that says if a woman or a girl is raped, it's their fault because their smile was too big, or their dress was too short, their skirt was too short, or maybe their breath smelled of alcohol. And Fortis struggled with this guilt, although she knew that she shouldn't have the guilt in the first place. She somehow knew that it wasn't her fault, and so one day she walked into a cafe when she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. She borrowed a pen and wrote in the journal that she carried with her a letter to Tom. She didn't even expect to do that, but she said, I need to be forgiven. Forgiven? She didn't do anything. But she needed to be freed of that guilt. And not only unexpectedly did she write the letter, she actually found Tom and sent it to him, I believe in email form. And for 9 years, they began corresponding. And he said, you know, I haven't really faced that myself. I kept telling myself that this was something consensual, that a boyfriend and girlfriend were doing together. I knew in the back of my head that what I'd done was rape, but I kept trying to push it away. And it's bending my mind too, the guilt and the weight of it. For 9 years they corresponded until they got the idea that, you know what, we have to meet face to face so that we both can find peace and reconciliation. And so they did. Her from Iceland and him from Australia. They met in South Africa, a place that needed and was going through great reconciliation after apartheid. And they figured that was not only the halfway point, but such an appropriate place to meet. So they met. Over a week, they talked. They faced their demons. They were even able to laugh with one another, and they found the reconciliation that both of them needed. And they went on to write a book together about this. And you can find their story on TED. It's a TED Talk. Amazing story of reconciliation that we know cannot happen for everybody. Right? This isn't a great story that can be okay for everyone because some people just can't do this for a million different reasons. But it seemed that the impossible that she could ever find peace after having her innocence stolen from her, impossible that he could ever find a way to forgive himself for that thing that he'd done that he pushed to the back of his mind, but somehow that reconciliation was not only made possible, but it became a reality. And then there's Stephen. Stephen was saying to everybody how he'd seen the clouds parted and Jesus sitting at the right hand of God. And people covered their ears. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear about this glorious vision that he'd seen, this vision of hope and security and peace. Instead, they covered their ears. And they dragged him out of the city, and they picked up rocks to stone him. But the amazing thing is that as they're throwing these rocks and they're hitting him in the head and in the body and his life is draining from him, he says to God, don't let these sins be held against them. In his dying moments, he asked God to forgive them for what they do. The same way that Jesus said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Another message of forgiveness, of something that seems utterly impossible, but somehow comes together when it needs to. So many things are right before our eyes, so many ways, as John writes. So many ways that we can't fathom. Some things we already have figured out. We know we have to do them, whether they're forgiveness or something that God has called us to do. But it becomes really difficult because we keep telling ourselves that no way is this possible. How am I ever going to make this happen? How can this ever become a reality? It's just too difficult. Whatever it may be. And so, as Jesus is talking to the disciples and telling them that he is the way, Thomas says, what are you talking about? Now we got to remember that John paints Thomas negatively. Remember doubting Thomas? That was John, right? And he sets the story up with this passage. Doubting Thomas is set up right here. What do you mean the way? Paint him as kind of dumb, you know. I don't know what you're talking about, man. And he says, are you not looking at me right now? Do you not see that I am the way? Because sometimes that way is right in front of us, but we don't want to see it. Just like those people who were stoning Stephen, they covered their ears. I don't want to hear you, la la la. Like that song, I'm covering my ears when you speak. But the way is right there in front of them. Even though it seemed utterly impossible. Well, in this act of Stephen getting stoned, there was this guy standing in the periphery. We kind of forget about him in the story, although this is where he's introduced and he becomes really big in the bigger picture. But this guy standing there off to the side where the people come up and they have their cloaks on and they're picking up these rocks and they're winding up to throw them. Like, this cloak is in my way. Hey man, can you hold my cloak? Oh yeah, good idea. Let me take mine off too. And this guy's holding these cloaks. This guy Saul, who will later be known as Paul, holding these cloaks and watching in approval as this man gets stoned to death for his faith. A faith that, lo and behold, this man carrying cloaks will embrace for himself. See, Stephen went out to preach. Stephen wasn't a big character in the story, but he felt empowered. He felt the Holy Spirit. He believed this message that Jesus said that any of you who ask for it in my name can have it. That all of you are empowered to preach and to heal and to manifest the presence of God amidst my people. Stephen, this nobody, believed him, and he had the gall to get up and start preaching. And it cost him his life. Now, I'm not going to steal the thunder from the Emmaus Road story that I'm sure will come up in the lectionary soon. I don't want to cheat myself with a sermon. But there it was. Maybe that was Paul's Emmaus Road experience right there. Maybe that is the point where Paul said, oh my God. What he's doing right now is what I'm supposed to be doing. And we just killed him for it. So now I have a responsibility to preach. How utterly impossible did it seem at the time that this man holding the cloaks was going to become the messenger for the kingdom of God. No matter what it is, no matter how impossible it seems, whether it is forgiveness, whether it is doing something, becoming your true self, whatever it is, no matter how impossible, we can't forget one very vital truth. God is still speaking. The story ain't over, folks. There are twists and turns that we have no idea where they're coming from or where they're going, but the story ain't over. John Robinson was the leader of the Pilgrim community, and in 1620, if you'll recall, the Puritans had already come over here. And then the Pilgrims, they went off to Holland, and they were going to set up camp there for religious freedom, and things didn't go so well. And so they decided, oh, we better head over to the colonies too. And so in 1620, their pastor, John Robinson, said, I'm not going with you. I can't. I'm too old. I got too much to do here. I can't go with you. But he told them, a greater light still breaks forth from God's holy word. Greater light still breaks forth from God's holy word. And that's what UCC gets, this still speaking message. God is still speaking. The story is not over. Things will happen here and outside of these walls that we cannot even fathom. In our own individual lives and things that we think that we can't possibly do anything about, that we cannot bring to fruition. Things are going to happen, will knock your socks off. People that you think are your enemy will become your biggest friend. People that you think are against the church and against the word and against the people will become the greatest protectors and saviors and doers. As we listen to the news and hear our political climate and everything that's going on, some people are glad and some people are really, really scared. Really nervous about what's going on when we watch the news about heads of offices being fired and you don't agree with me, you gotta go. I'm not saying something political here, but I'm saying there are people who are legitimately scared. Whatever the situation is, whether it's political, whether it's individual, whether it's in a community, whatever it is, Anne Lamott, who I'll have the pleasure of seeing next month at a writers' conference at Princeton, said something very, very amazing, I thought. She said, no matter what's happening, No matter how daunting everything looks, don't worry about it. Because grace always bats last. And